Hey, what's going on, guys? We have EBC Rotors and Pads in front of me right here. I'm going to show you the entire lineup. Let's do this. Hey, what's going on, guys? It's JP from EdgeAutosport.com, where you can find all sorts of 10th gen Civic parts like the ones I'm going to talk about today, the EBC Rotors and Pads. Pretty excited to tell you about these things, so let's get started. Make sure you subscribe, make sure you like the video. If you have any comments or questions throughout or at the end of the video, let us know, post them below, we'll get back to you. Yeah, like I said, I'm super excited. We haven't really done a whole lot of videos on brakes and other stuff besides power and you know, chassis modifications and stuff like that, kind of the flashy stuff. But brakes are definitely necessary to slow down the car, obviously, and the faster you're going, the more important they become to slow it down in a reasonable fashion, in a quick fashion. And not just that, but be consistent doing that. You know, every car comes with brakes sufficient enough out of the box to just, you know, stop you in any given moment. Most speeds, most reasonable speeds, but we all know that we get going a lot faster than that sometimes, especially out on the track, which a lot of these brakes I'm going to show you are good for. You know, it's important to address the brakes at some point. Honestly, they're kind of like a clutch, right? Eventually, you're going to replace it just simply because they're worn out. And a lot of people will just replace it with a more performance-oriented braking setup, even if it's just a simple set of rotors and pads and nothing else. So EBC Brakes is a brand we've been selling a long time. They have an entire lineup for the 10th gen Civic. We're going to go over them right now. And just tell you all about them, tell you what the options are, and just, you know, kind of a few tidbits about like which one is right for you and what the application is all about. So I'm going to start with the rotors right here. There's 4 different rotors. These are the stock replacement rotors. I think they refer to them as the Ultimax 2, and that's just their stock replacement. You can see that they're just plain, you know, they're blank face rotors, just like a stock rotor. All of these rotors are going to come in a kind of they call it a thermic coating. It's like a black coating. You know, it's going to do a couple things. First of all, it keeps it from like corroding and rusting just sitting out throughout the distribution process, right? Sometimes you get like pieces of something made out of metal shipped to you, and it's already got some like surface rust or buildup on it. That's not going to happen with these. These are going to stay nice and clean throughout the distribution process all the way to your door. They're going to show up just like this in this black thermal coating. And then once you put them on the car, the surface, like the friction surface, is going to actually rub that coating away, and it's just going to look like regular iron. But the center and the vents on these vented brakes on the inside, they're all going to stay black, which is going to help prevent corrosion and rust moving forward as it's on the car, as it's being used. We all know that sometimes brakes look like crap after sitting for a while, or even like after a rainstorm or something, like you're driving through the rain, you let it sit for like 12 hours or something and it's got a bunch of buildup on it. This will prevent that from happening. So these will stay nice and clean as well as perform better. So again, this is the Ultimax 2. If you just want a plain and simple rotor to replace what you have on there already, this is the ticket right here. All these are going to be the same, you know, kind of standard construction. The front rotors are vented right here, so you can see these need a lot more cooling capacity. They need to be built way heavier duty than the rears. They're going to see the majority of the braking power and the heat and the friction. So these are going to be a lot beefier rotor than the rear. The rear is just a single flat disc, no venting. That's really all it needs to be. It just needs to be, it's a much simpler design, cheaper, and smaller, so it doesn't see nearly as much heat and friction as the front does. That's the stock replacement. Moving over here, I believe these are called the BSD, and this is a pretty unique slot pattern here. It's kind of like a V shape with one leading to the outside that's a little bit longer, but the front and rear have the exact same shape. This is just going to do a couple things. This is going to help clear the gases and the debris that's created from all the heat from the friction of the pad rubbing along the rotor. This helps clear that gas and heat out of there. What it's also going to do is help clear off the pad and make it a smooth surface. It's kind of just like scraping the pad off just a tiny bit at a time every single rotation, and it keeps the pad really nice and flat and flush against the rotor. So all these are going to do that in a little bit different way. You know, to be perfectly honest with you, they advertise the BSD as kind of their more advanced design. This is kind of the highest performance version, but all these are going to do a somewhat of the same thing no matter what you get. Any of the slots or the dimples or the slotted and dimpled, they're all going to kind of do the same thing. Remove that gas, help keep the rotor and the pad kind of flush together, and make the pad wear a little bit more consistent. So if you're going to track your car, or if you use it in any sort of aggressive way, you know, canyon carving, quarter mile racing, you know, on Wednesday nights, whatever it is, these are good ones to have just to keep your brakes in good shape throughout the life of that type of use. And then it doesn't matter if you just daily drive it, you can still use these too. That's not a big deal. They're just going to be a little bit better in that higher performance situation. So we have the BSD right here. We have the 3GD Sport Rotors right here. That's a combination of these dimples and the slots. The reason why I like dimples actually, rather than drilling all the way through the rotor, is these will prevent, they kind of have the same effect as the drilled, but it still has the integrity of the rotor built in. It's not drilling all the way through. So that metal is still there. The structural integrity is still there, and it's not going to crack nearly as easy as a full drill through. So that's one of the reasons why I like the dimples, especially on street cars, because you're going to keep it on as long as you can. You know, most street cars, you're not going to replace the brakes just because you used them on a track day, like a full-on race car where you need to replace stuff more often. This is going to be used for a lot longer period of time, so the less prone to cracking they are, the better it's going to be for a street car. So that's why I like the dimples. And then you have kind of a more traditional, just slotted design right here. This is kind of a segmented slot, two different segments here. Again, it's going to do the same thing as I described before, maybe just a little bit simpler way, but still going to have the same effect. So 4 different rotor options for you. We've always had good success with EBC, so definitely a good set of options here for your 10th gen on the rotors. Now over to the brake pads. You also have 4 different choices in brake pads. These are going to be quite a bit different from top to bottom here than the rotors over here. So I'm going to start with these black ones. These are also called the Ultimax Pads, and that's kind of their line that's made for stock replacement. EBC is color coded, so it makes it really, really easy to remember what you're buying, what you need to replace stuff with, and what you're looking at. So the black is just kind of a stock replacement pad. It's OE style. It's going to act like an OE pad. It's not going to be the lowest dust. It's not going to be the highest performance. It's going to have really good cold bite. It's going to have a long life, but it's not going to have the same characteristics in high heat situations where you're pounding it over and over and over at the track or on an autocross event or in the canyons. You're going to feel some fade if you push them too hard, but it's great for just a daily driver. The green stuff is the next step up. About as good wear probably as the black ones, but it's just gonna have a tad bit more friction, a tad bit more durability when it comes to high heat environments. You can push it a little bit higher. If you're a guy that goes to the canyons or does some spirited driving from time to time and needs to use your brakes, but never goes to the track, never does track days, never does autocross, this is a perfect brake pad for that. It's a semi-low dust pad, so it's not going to create a ton of dust, but it will have some dust, so just be aware of that. The red stuff is probably one of the most popular from EBC. It is a very, very low dust pad, so it's not going to generate dust like a stock pad or even like the green stuff. It's going to be very, very low dust. It's a ceramic pad. Now with that said, ceramic pads aren't going to have the initial bite of a stock style pad. They don't have that cold bite that just feels really, really touchy and nice even when it's cold. I mean, if you're daily driving, it's not so bad that it shouldn't be used daily. It can totally be used daily. It just feels slightly different on that initial hit of the brakes. With that said, they can survive a little bit more heat. They can survive some very light autocross stuff, light track day use. Nothing too major, but they can resist fade a little bit better than the green stuff and definitely more than the black stuff. Yellow stuff is where it gets more towards the track, right? If you're a guy that takes your car out to the track maybe once a quarter, once every 2 months, a few times a summer, 2-3 laps at a time, this is going to be perfect for you. They also feel, if anything, they actually probably bite a little bit better in the cold maybe than the red stuff, just based on my experience. They do bite really nicely, even though they have that track capability and that high heat capability. Usually those things don't go hand in hand, but the yellow stuff is good really all over the board. You can daily drive them all day long. The only bad thing about it is, and I wouldn't call it a bad thing, is it just wears a little bit faster due to the friction material. It's not ceramic, it doesn't last super long, but it's going to have good bite. It's going to have good overall usage for street and track. It is not a full-on track pad. If you're doing 10 laps at a time and really pounding the brakes, it's still probably not the pad for you, but let's face it, the majority of people don't. I have personally taken a set of yellow stuff pads out on the track 3-4 laps at a time. Feels awesome, does not fade nearly as bad as a stock pad, barely fades at all really. So that's where those shine the most. You can totally daily those as well. I love the yellow stuff pads personally. So anyway, that is the breakdown of the EBC line. Like I said, I was super excited to bring these to you because there really hasn't been a ton of brake options for the 10th gen Civic for the first few years of that car's existence, but it's a good solid choice from EBC now. We're gonna be carrying these. These are up on the site. Make sure you visit edgeautosport.com where you can find them. Again, if you guys have any questions about them, just let us know. We're happy to help you as always. And thanks for watching the video. We'll see you next time. We're actually gonna do a part 2 where we install, I'm gonna do yellow stuffs and the BSD rotors on our project FC3. So stay tuned for that. Look out for that video coming soon. We'll see you next time.